This might be a little controversial, but I think I prefer Stargate Atlantis over SG1. Welcome to SciTrek, your sci-fi TV and movie channel.
I don't think you realize the implications of this. Or maybe you do.
I'm as surprised about this as you are, if I'm honest, but I recently have actually finally been able to watch Stargate Atlantis again. Now, I have them on DVD somewhere in the garage, but I actually don't have a DVD player anymore. So when I suddenly realized that Sky TV over in the UK was actually carrying Stargate Atlantis again, I got very excited. And I realized that I can watch the series again for the first time in a long time. Too long. Why do I say I think I might prefer SGA to SG1? Is that just wrong to even compare them? Well, I would argue that actually trying to compare or trying to choose your favorite between SG1 and SGA is like picking between your two children, like trying to pick a favorite child. You shouldn't do it. Shouldn't even cross your mind. But let's be honest, we all do. We've all thought about it at least once, that there's just one child you like that a little bit more than the other one. I'm not going to tell you which one, but they know. Now, obviously, I'm joking a little bit. I love my children equally, and I love Stargate SG1 and SGA equally. You notice I'm not mentioning SGU, but we'll leave that kettle of fish alone for a minute. But I have to admit, if I'm really, really harsh on myself, and I have to say which one would I rather watch, at the moment, I am absolutely adoring SG Atlantis, and I actually think it was a slightly better produced series than SG1. So why do I say that? Well, first of all, obviously, the production value is better from the first moment in Stargate Atlantis. The first series, maybe even two series of SG1, are much weaker than what followed. I would actually argue that Stargate SG1 really didn't find its feet properly until halfway through the third season. They didn't have the budget. I think as creators, they needed to learn how to tell the story a little bit better, maybe. And I think over time, they did do that. They just got better at creating Stargate, as you'd expect. By the time SGA came along, they had perfected it. So from day one, Stargate Atlantis was as good as anything SG1 ever did. So let's break this down a little bit and have a think about this in a few different ways. The characters. I would actually argue that the characters from SG1 and SGA were very similar, because I think Brad Wright, Robert C. Cooper, etc., really stuck to the formula from SG1. They had that slightly sarcastic, good-looking leader. They had the alien warrior. They had the scientist and the genius. They then had characters like Weir, who were caring and had a big heart. I actually think they very much stuck to the same kind of formula, even though they tweaked it. Obviously, Weir is different to Hammond in lots and lots of ways, but I think the basic idea and the basic formula about where they were going with the character is kind of similar. They knew that certain things would work for the series, and they stuck with them. They played with them a little bit. They fine-tuned them for Stargate Atlantis, which I think, again, is important. And I think they learned their lessons from maybe a few of the mistakes from Stargate SG1, and saying that the mistakes in Stargate SG1 is, not like saying mistakes in Star Trek. Very, very different. Minor errors or things they learned. Let's not call errors. Let's not say mistakes from SG1. Let's just say they just learned from things they might have done differently. In Stargate Atlantis, they used those lessons and they used them very, very well. Now, I will say, actually, though, that Stargate Atlantis, the first season, did need some fine-tuning. Obviously, we did see Ford leave, and we saw Jason Momoa and his character Ronan Dex come in. Now, I never disliked Ford. I actually thought he was a really interesting character, but let's be honest, he's no Ronan Dex. Now, I would equate this to sort of what Star Trek The Next Generation had to do when they had to rejig the crew. Like when Tasha Yar died, they made Worf the security officer. Geordi LaForge magically got a load of engineering qualifications and became the chief engineer. they rejigged it. It made for a better show. Now, I think with this, they actually did kind of same thing. They actually rejigged it slightly, and it made for a much better show afterwards. But the first season was not markedly weaker than the second. Just bringing in Ronan Dex made it just that little bit better, though. How about humour? I will always argue that the thing missing from SGU was the humour. The light-hearted storylines, the light-hearted banter between the cast. That really lacked. We didn't get an SGU, and I think it hurt throughout the series that we didn't. In Stargate Atlantis, we got exactly the same kind of humour that we got in SG1. And I would argue that for every really funny bit in SG1, we get just as a few. I don't think there's much difference between the series. I just love that Atlantis carried on with the same type of feel. I wish SGU had. The villains. Obviously, SG1 are the Goa'uld, and then the Replicators, and then the Ori, as well as a few other side villains here and there. In Stargate Atlantis, it was mainly the Wraith, even though we did get to see some other villains along the way as well, including different versions of the Replicators, etc. For me, though, let's just compare the Goa'uld to the Wraith quickly. Well, for me, the Wraith were a lot scarier, even though they kept doing all that stuff with the, which was a little silly at times. Once you notice that they're doing that, once you notice actually the teeth thing, it is a little funny. But the drone Wraith were genuinely scary. If one of those was walking towards you, looking all annoyed, a little bit of wee would come out of you and you would run away. All right, the Queens and things like that weren't as scary. But the drones, that'll keep you up at night. The Goa'uld were never that scary to me. I thought they were, intimidating, maybe. They were clever. They were a good villain, and you never quite knew who was who. But they were never really scary. The Wraith were. Now, obviously, they took the whole space vampires and ran with it. They created a villain, though, that was very hard to kill. It was like they took, let's have a look at all the monster movies that have been really popular in the last 20 years and mash them all together.
Do we have an agreement?
We do.
I believe among your people it is customary to shake hands. Just a little Wraith humor.
And it worked. The Replicators were never particularly scary. The Wraith were. I actually think out of all of the Stargate villains, they were probably the most scary, except for maybe Anubis, because Anubis actually did scare the bejesus out of me. How about from a logical point of view? Was Stargate Atlantis cleverer than SG1 in any way? Well, the Puddle Jumpers for me were a very clever addition to the Stargate universe. I've always said in SG1, it was kind of infuriating that we just walked through the gate and you can only basically explore the other side within walking distance. It didn't really make any logical sense. Now, with the addition of the Puddle Jumpers, the next thing the Ancients did was actually put the Stargates into space. That, again, was actually a very clever way of doing it, particularly if you want to explore the universe, but you don't want anybody else to find your gate by accident. So I always really liked the Puddle Jumpers, even though I think they were seriously overpowered shuttle, and I might do a video talking about the Puddle Jumpers at some point in the future. If you want me to, get into the comments. I do think they allowed for way more storylines than basically SG1 was able to do when they just went for a walk through the gate. How about the Ancients? Well, we learned an awful lot about the Ancients in SG1, but we learned way more about them in Stargate Atlantis and some of the crossover episodes we had between SG1 and SGA. We actually got to meet a lot of the Ancients in Stargate Atlantis, and I think that was really, really interesting because we actually got to see them in their human form. They're slightly weaker, kind of arrogant human form as well, which gave them a little bit more of a kind of human layer to them that maybe we didn't get to see in Stargate SG1. It made them a little bit more real. I've always argued that when Stargate returns, I would love to see an Ancients prequel series or maybe even a movie. And because the Ancients are such an important part of Stargate, I'd love to get a bit more of a feel for them. But Stargate Atlantis did do that in lots and lots of different ways. It just added so much to the Stargate history and to the Stargate universe. It was fascinating to see the ancients, and I'm really glad we got to see them in as many different ways as we did. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that Brad Wright and Robert C. Cooper had 7 years to learn all about the Stargate universe and how to make the perfect Stargate show. They then made Stargate Atlantis. They took some of the things that maybe they didn't get quite right from SG1 and they improved on them. They gave us characters that were well known to us in lots of ways. They gave us a show that still felt like SG1 in lots of ways. They'd really fine-tuned the formula that made Stargate SG1 brilliant. Right now, I'm about halfway through the second season of Stargate Atlantis, and I am absolutely adoring watching it all again. It's been so long since I've got to see Stargate Atlantis. Some of these episodes I'd forgotten all about, and I cannot wait for what's coming next. But guys, get into the comments and tell me what you think. Was SGA just that a little bit better than SG1 now you look back on it? Was it, like I said, the formula for SG1 but fine-tuned? Was it, in lots of ways, the perfect Stargate series? And more importantly, that we never got to see the Stargate Atlantis movie, Extinction. Again, that is something I'm going to talk about in a future video. And again, get into the comments if you want me to. I would love to know what you thought of SGA. What were its strengths? What were its weaknesses? And actually, out of the 3 different series of Stargate, what was your favorite? Get into the comments and tell me exactly what you think. If you are new to the channel, please like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. It really helps us out and you'll never miss any of our new videos. Also, you can go to patreon.com/SciTrek, where most of our new videos appear first. And for a small contribution each month that really supports the channel, really helps keep us going, you get to see them without the adverts and before everybody else. You even get a free gift after 3 months. Can't say fairer than that. As always, please stay safe, and I'll see you next time.